funeral is supposed to be about grief. In Tehran, on the 3rd of July 2026, it became a scoreboard. When the Saudi delegation stepped forward to pay respects to Ali Khamenei, the Qari did not read just any verse. He read Ale Imran, verse 13. Indeed, there was a sign for you in the two armies that met in battle, one fighting for the cause of Allah and the other in denial. The believers saw their enemy twice their number, but Allah supports with His victory whoever He wills. Surely in this is a lesson for people of insight. This verse was not a simple verse. It was a passage recalling Badr, where a small, outmatched band of believers overcame a much larger army by the will of God. Badr was fought on land that is Saudi Arabia today, and the verse was not read by accident. This verse was chosen carefully to match the state of Saudi Arabia today, to taunt it, to warn it not to align with the forces of evil as it is doing right now, and also to advise it that if it chooses Ummah and Islam over everything else, Allah will certainly be with the believers and grant victory to them. This is why this moment from Khamenei's funeral is being talked about the most. Iran warned Saudi Arabia multiple times not to ally with those oppressing the Ummah, but these warnings were ignored. Saudi Arabia instead always cared about its image and its tourism, gave a few condemnations here and there, and that's it. Now that this clip of Iran taunting Saudi Arabia with a verse is going viral, what is the issue with it? That verse is indeed a taunt directed at them, but it also conveys a message and offers advice. There is still time for them to join hands and unite as companions under Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the spirit of the Battle of Badr, where Allah granted them an impossible victory. This victory was so significant that it altered the course of history thereafter. Khamenei was eliminated in an American strike on his residence on the 28th of February. His granddaughter, his son-in-law, and his daughter-in-law all died alongside him. Even after his death, his legacy continued, and Iran stood strong, the way Khamenei used to stand against the aggressors. The war that followed was one Iran was expected to lose. It didn't. Tehran is reported to have emerged with the Strait of Hormuz slipping further under its control. A nation that buried its leader and still stood taller than the nation that attacked him. Saudi Arabia, entrusted with the guardianship of Islam's two holiest mosques, reportedly maintained a quiet alignment with Washington throughout. Some reports go further, covert strikes against Iran itself, while those reports remain unverified. The truth is, the Ummah was indeed disheartened by the actions of Saudi Arabia. Over the years, Saudi Arabia seems to be worried about its tourism much more than Islam itself. When neighboring nations are attacked, when Muslims are persecuted, it certainly does a lot for them, but not as much as is expected from them. An oath to the Ummah is not measured by statements. It is measured by where a nation stands when the Ummah is under fire. By examining who received what, a hierarchy becomes evident, one that Iran never needed to publicly declare. Nations under attack and facing persecution like Yemen and Lebanon were met with verses of martyrdom, unbroken pledges, and divine victory, a message that their sacrifice had been seen and accounted for. The Qari recited the verse from Surah Al-Ahzab, describing those who fulfilled their pledge to God and those still waiting their turn, none of them changing their commitment in the least. Qatar, Turkey, and Pakistan sat in the middle tier, thanked for mediation, handed verses of sacrifice and honorable conduct, and respected as partners, but never folded into the resistance camp. Russia, China, India, and Egypt received calmer verses still, reassurance and reward, the language reserved for guests, not comrades. And then Saudi Arabia, alone among the Gulf's major powers, handed the verse of Badr, a battle against disbelief, fought on Saudi soil, delivered to a state that markets itself as Islam's chief custodian. You do not need a translator to catch a taunt hidden in scripture. Riyadh came to shake hands at a coffin and left having been placed publicly and unmistakably on the side the verse says God did not stand on. That is the price of betrayal. You can send a minister. You can bow at a casket. You can issue a statement of condolence. But you cannot recite your way out of where you stood when it mattered. The world does not always say it in a headline. Sometimes it says it in a verse, read once, in front of every camera in the room. For years, a certain narrative insisted that Iran and its allies were the isolated ones, propped up by nothing but propaganda and proxies. That narrative attended its own funeral this week. Delegations from more than 30 countries came, heads of state, parliament speakers, foreign ministers. Not because Tehran demanded it, but because the story the world was sold could not survive contact with reality. Meanwhile, the government that quietly stood beside the aggressor received no headline of solidarity, only a verse about an army God did not stand with, read aloud, needing no press release to make its point. This is a pattern. History keeps repeating itself. Those who trade the trust of the Ummah for a seat at someone else's table are eventually named, sometimes by scholars, sometimes by history, sometimes by a reciter at a funeral. And those the world spent years lying about, sanctioning and sidelining, walk away from moments like this with something no propaganda budget can purchase: recognition, delegation by delegation, and verse by verse. A funeral told the truth that years of headlines tried to bury.